All right, next. Best for next to last. Tennessee. According to Athlon here, I mean, hell, a lot to like about Tennessee. Overshot expectations. Dropped the bowl game, unfortunately. But still, I mean, with Hendon Hooker back, with Tillman back, with 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen back, this could be the best offense in the SEC with Josh Heupel and the tempo he like. We'll see how many they may set a record for fake injuries they face this year because that's going to be the only way to slow them down. Thoughts on Tennessee? I know you already got them as the second best team projected in the East.
Yeah, I think optimism should be very high at Tennessee. We have heard that before, but I think there's
every 3 years.
Yeah, every 3 years. I think the question that I have with the offense is, I mean, Hendon Hooker was so good last year. He led the SEC in yards per attempt over in SEC-only games last year. Cedric Tillman going to be even better this year, I think. The questions for me at Tennessee, the offensive line's got to play a little bit better, and not to mention filling out those 2 and 3 receiver spots. I'm on the Jalen Hyatt breakout train once again this year for maybe like the 3rd year in a row. But you just see the impact of last year for Tennessee. I mean, they averaged 21 points a game to 39. They led the SEC in plays of 40-plus after having just 3 the year before. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to me, the optimism is definitely on offense. And I think the question is, like, what's the next step for that offense? Like, can these new pieces that are stepping in the second year, can that take Tennessee up another notch? So statistically, it may be hard to average 40-something points a game, but if they do, then you're talking, okay, we've only got them 8-4. Maybe they need to be a little bit higher if they can reach that level, plus some improvement on defense.
Now, what's a bigger question mark for the Vols for you? Offensive tackle, I believe they led, if you want to call it, or they had the most sacks allowed
44,
in the SEC, or defensive backfield, which their best player got drafted in the NFL in the second round, I believe, out of the Alontae Taylor. So, and they got toasted by a lot of good SEC teams, and they got toasted in the bowl game. So
Theo Jackson also gone too for them.
Oh, of course, another draft pick. So your 2 best players gone out of the backfield. So what's the bigger question for you, the offensive tackle or defensive backfield?
It's a great question because I think obviously you have to protect Hendon Hooker.
Right.
I think Tennessee's depth along the line of scrimmage, especially on offense, needs to continue to improve. I would still pick the defense though, just because I think when studying Tennessee over the last couple of years, in watching some of these teams when they were at the top of the SEC, like how many difference makers do they have on defense? I mean, they had just waves of them, and it's like you start looking at this year with Young and Barron and Banks, like those guys are on our all SEC team, and I think somebody will emerge out of the secondary. But at the same time, like Tennessee needs more guys. They need more difference makers on that side of the ball, and that will help them close the gap to Georgia and some of these other teams in there. So I think based upon the fact that Tennessee struggled so much in the SEC on defense, in SEC games, giving up 200 rushing yards, over 30 points a game, I'd be worried more about the defense right now.
Now, one measuring stick game, not right out the gate, week 2 at Pitt. They lost to Pitt last season. What can you tell us about Pitt? I know there's a lot of transition, but how do they match up against the Vols this year?
A little bit different Pitt team this year. They lost Kenny Pickett to the NFL. Jordan Addison, the standout receiver, transferred to USC. The strengths of Pittsburgh, 5 offensive line starters back, should be one of the better groups in the ACC. The defense is very good, too, strong on the defensive front. And at quarterback, it could be Keaton Slovis, the USC transfer. So the cupboard isn't bare at Pitt. I know they lost a lot in Pickett and Addison. I still think they're very good. So I'm picking Tennessee to win that game, but I would say it's not going to be an easy game still because Pitt is still very good along the line of scrimmage, and defensively they can cause some problems for Tennessee.
Is that just a team it's kind of hard to predict what they are? Because I've had a guy on recently, a Vegas insider. He said even though the line favors Tennessee, he's betting Pitt. And then I've had Dave Bartu on the line. He says Pitt's the most overrated team in the country. So it's like, I don't know who to believe on this one.
Yeah, I think it goes kind of at the environment of college football right now, which is the transfers. Like, I mean, you watch Keaton Slovis at USC. He was great as a freshman. He was inconsistent after. And, the 2020 season was so weird and scrambled some of our statistics and some of these things that I don't really know, what to believe on some of these, things.
Right.
So I think we have him in the top 25. Our magazine went to press before Jordan Addison officially decided to leave Pitt. We may have lowered Pitt a few spots. I still think they're somewhere 8-4, 9-3, type of team this year.
So it's just safe to say this is not going to be a layup for Tennessee.
Right. That's the point I was getting at. Yeah, I don't. I think if I had to pick right now, and you asked me, I would take Tennessee. But I do think that that's still a very dangerous game for Tennessee, even though that Pitt's losing the first-round quarterback in Jordan Addison.
Now, what do you think will be the tougher game for the Vols? Florida at home, which is beating them like 19 out of 20, unfortunately, or the very next week at LSU, because these are swing games right here, Stephen. Death Valley, it's going to be tough. They're going to have 2 weeks to prepare for it, though. What's your thoughts on that?
I would go at LSU. I think LSU is one of those teams that's going to get better from week 1 to week 12 because of the coaching staff and some of the talent they still have in the program. Not to mention, I think if you're Tennessee and you're looking at that schedule and you go, we got to beat Florida in the East, we get them at home, but everything sets up, and then, you got to go on the next week on the road to go to Death Valley and play LSU, and then, of course, Alabama's coming up right after that. So a very difficult stretch of games, but I would say at LSU would be my pick.
Okay. All right, then last but not least here, we got Vanderbilt